16-year-old Zara Mitchell's hand trembled as she pressed her phone against her ear, tears streaming down her face while 50 passengers stared in shocked silence. The flight attendant who'd just humiliated her stood frozen in the aisle, face draining of color as the person on the other end of Zara's call spoke. "Ground the plane," came the calm yet terrifying voice through the speaker, loud enough for those in nearby seats to hear. Nobody could have imagined that this ordinary Tuesday flight would lead to a congressional hearing, 3 corporate resignations, and the largest racial discrimination lawsuit in aviation history. How could a single phone call from a teenage girl bring a multi-billion-dollar airline to its knees? Before we dive into this shocking story, let me know where you're watching from, and if you believe in standing up for justice, hit that like and subscribe button to stay updated on more stories that expose the truth about discrimination in America today. It was supposed to be the most exciting day of Zara Mitchell's life. The 16-year-old stood in Detroit Metropolitan Airport, clutching her boarding pass with trembling fingers as she prepared to board her first solo flight. She adjusted the strap of her backpack, which contained her most precious possession, a flash drive with her groundbreaking diagnostic algorithm that could revolutionize early disease detection in underserved communities. "You call me the moment you land, you hear me?" her mother had said that morning, hugging her so tightly Zara could barely breathe. Behind the fierce embrace, Zara knew her mom was hiding tears. The Mitchells had scraped together every penny they had, but couldn't afford to accompany their daughter to the National Youth Science Competition in Washington, D.C., where she'd be representing East Side Community High School. "I will, Mom," Zara had promised, trying to sound more confident than she felt. For 6 months, she'd worked weekends and after school at the local community center, saving every dollar toward this trip. Her computer science teacher, Ms. Rodriguez, had helped her apply for partial sponsorship, but the rest had come from Zara's own pocket. As she handed her boarding pass to the gate agent, Zara couldn't help but notice the surprised look on the woman's face. "Enjoy your flight, Miss Mitchell," the agent said with a smile that seemed strangely knowing. Zara mumbled a thank you and proceeded down the jetway, too nervous about flying to question the interaction. When she stepped onto the plane, the flight attendant greeting passengers glanced at her boarding pass and gestured toward the left. "First class is this way," she said. Zara blinked in confusion, but followed the direction. She had purchased the cheapest economy ticket available. There must be some mistake. But when she arrived at seat 3A, a plush leather window seat with ample legroom, her boarding pass indeed matched the seat number. A glitch in the airline system had somehow upgraded her, though Zara didn't realize this was an error. She settled in, marveling at the generous space and trying not to feel out of place amid the business travelers typing furiously on laptops and sipping pre-flight champagne. "Water before takeoff?" A flight attendant appeared, offering drinks to the first-class passengers. Her name tag read Veronica Pearson, and she had a polished professional demeanor. She smiled warmly at the middle-aged white businessman across the aisle, chatting with him about the weather in D.C. When she turned to Zara, however, something subtle shifted in her expression. "What would you like?" Veronica asked, her tone noticeably cooler. "Water, please," Zara replied, straightening her posture. The flight attendant nodded curtly and moved on without the friendly banter she'd offered other passengers. Zara tried to focus on the excitement of her upcoming presentation rather than the uncomfortable interaction. She'd been working on her algorithm for nearly 2 years, ever since her grandmother had been diagnosed with cancer at a late stage because she couldn't afford regular checkups. The algorithm could analyze basic health metrics available from simple low-cost tests to flag potential concerns before they became critical. It wasn't perfect yet, but it showed remarkable accuracy in preliminary testing. As the remaining passengers boarded, Zara pulled out her notes to review her presentation one last time. Her school had never sent a student to this competition before. Most people didn't expect much from Eastside, a chronically underfunded public school in a predominantly black neighborhood. But Ms. Rodriguez had recognized Zara's potential and encouraged her to dream bigger than their circumstances suggested she should. The captain's voice came over the PA system, welcoming everyone aboard Flight 2187 to Washington, D.C. Zara took a deep breath. This was it. Her chance to show the world what she could do. to prove that innovation could come from anywhere, even from a girl whose family could barely afford the trip to present her work. Veronica returned, checking that seatbelts were fastened before takeoff. She smiled warmly at every passenger in first class, making small talk about their destinations and reasons for travel. When she reached Zara, however, she simply glanced at her seatbelt without speaking and moved on. Zara tried to ignore the slight, focusing instead on her upcoming presentation. But as the plane began to taxi, she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right about how Veronica looked at her. The flight attendant's eyes had lingered a moment too long, filled with something that looked disturbingly like suspicion. The plane had barely reached cruising altitude when Veronica Pearson returned to the first-class cabin. She methodically worked her way through the aisle, offering drinks and snacks with a practiced smile. When she reached Zara's row, however, her demeanor changed dramatically. "Excuse me," Veronica said, her voice suddenly sharp. "May I see your boarding pass again?" Zara blinked in surprise, but pulled up the electronic pass on her phone. "Here it is." Veronica scrutinized the screen with narrowed eyes. "This seat is reserved for our premium customers. Are you sure you're in the right place?" "My boarding pass says 3A, Zara replied, pointing to the seat assignment clearly displayed on her phone. "Let me see that again," Veronica insisted, taking the phone from Zara's hand without asking. She studied it with obvious skepticism. "Did you perhaps board before your assigned group?" "No, ma'am. I boarded when they called my group." The flight attendant's expression hardened. "It's just unusual to see someone like you in first class, especially someone so young traveling alone." The implication hung in the air, crystal clear to Zara and everyone within earshot. Several nearby passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "Someone like me?" Zara repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "I mean someone so young," Veronica said quickly, though her tone suggested otherwise. "Did you perhaps sneak up from economy during boarding?" The accusation was so blatant that Zara could only stare in disbelief. Heat rose to her cheeks, and she became acutely aware of the other passengers watching the interaction. "No, I didn't," she managed to say. "The gate agent directed me here." Veronica replied, clearly unconvinced. "Well, sometimes people get confused about where they belong." She handed the phone back with 2 fingers, as if touching it any longer than necessary would somehow soil her hand. "I'll need to check this with the manifest." Across the aisle, a white businessman in his 50s frowned. "Excuse me," he called out. "Is there a problem here?" Veronica turned to him with a completely transformed expression, all warmth and professionalism. "No problem at all, Mr. Jenkins. Just a seating mix-up we need to sort out." "The young lady's boarding pass clearly shows this seat," Bradley Jenkins said, nodding toward Zara. "If the airline assigned her here, what's the issue?" For a moment, Veronica seemed caught off guard by his intervention, but she quickly recovered. "Sir, with all due respect, there are certain protocols we need to follow for unaccompanied minors, especially when there appears to be a seating irregularity." "I'm not an unaccompanied minor," Zara interjected. "I'm 16, and the airline allowed me to book my ticket independently." Veronica's smile tightened. "Nevertheless, I'll need to verify this." She lowered her voice to address Mr. Jenkins. "Sir, I'd hate to have to report disruptive behavior that might require us to remove passengers before takeoff." The threat was thinly veiled, and Mr. Jenkins immediately backed down. "Just trying to help," he muttered, turning his attention back to his laptop. Veronica disappeared to the front of the plane, returning minutes later with a superior smile. "As I suspected, there's been an error. This seat is supposed to be occupied by a Mrs. Zara Michaels, a platinum member. You'll need to move to your assigned seat in economy." "But my boarding pass clearly says—" "It's a computer error," Veronica cut her off, loud enough for everyone to hear. "People need to know their place on this aircraft. Now gather your things immediately." Zara felt her throat tighten as tears threatened to form. Humiliated and confused, she began collecting her belongings while Veronica stood over her, arms crossed impatiently. "I have important materials for a science competition," Zara explained, carefully placing her notes in her Backpack. I just need a moment to organize them. We don't have a moment, Veronica snapped, grabbing Zara's backpack and hastily shoving some papers inside. The rough handling caused several pages to crumple. The other passengers are waiting for their service. With each passing second, the situation grew more mortifying. Every eye in first class was on her now, watching as she was effectively ejected from her seat. Some passengers looked uncomfortable, others curious, but not one spoke up after seeing what happened to Mr. Jenkins. This way, Veronica said, practically marching Zara through the aircraft to economy class. She stopped at row 27, pointing to a middle seat squeezed between two larger passengers. This is your actual assignment. As Zara reluctantly took the cramped seat, Veronica leaned in and whispered, "Next time, don't try to take what isn't meant for you. People like you need to understand boundaries." Have you ever experienced that pit in your stomach when someone treats you differently because of who you are? Comment number 1, if you've ever felt targeted or discriminated against in a public place. Hit that like button if you believe everyone deserves to be treated with dignity regardless of their race or age. And subscribe now if you want to see justice served in situations like these. But what would happen next? Would anyone stand up for Zara as she was squeezed into economy class? Or would this humiliation be just the beginning of her ordeal? Wedged between a large man in a business suit who had claimed both armrests and a woman who smelled strongly of perfume, Zara tried to collect herself. Her cheeks burned with humiliation as she attempted to create enough space to breathe. Fuma, middle seat, always the least desirable on any flight, felt especially confining after the spacious first-class accommodation she'd been forced to abandon. When she opened her backpack to retrieve her notes, Zara discovered that several pages had been torn during Veronica's rough handling. The damage wasn't catastrophic, but it would make her presentation preparation more difficult. She bit her lip, fighting back tears. She wouldn't give Veronica the satisfaction of seeing her cry. Through the gap between the seats ahead of her, Zara could observe the first-class cabin. Veronica had resumed her duties, offering premium snacks and beverages with practiced charm to the other passengers. Her entire demeanor was transformed from the harsh, accusatory manner she had used with Zara. She laughed at a passenger's joke, topped off another's drink without being asked, and generally provided the exceptional service that Zara had been denied. An hour into the flight, the beverage cart finally reached Zara's row, but it wasn't Veronica pushing it. Instead, a younger male flight attendant named Miguel, according to his name tag, was serving the economy section. "Water, please," Zara requested when her turn came. Miguel nodded and handed her a plastic cup with ice and a mini can of water. As she took it, their eyes met briefly, and something in his expression suggested he might have witnessed what happened earlier. He looked like he wanted to say something, but instead moved on to the next passenger. 30 minutes later, Zara's throat was dry again. The cabin air was stale, and her cramped position had left her dehydrated. She looked around for Miguel but couldn't see him. Instead, Veronica was now working the economy cabin, having switched positions with her colleague. Zara pressed the call button above her seat. She watched as Veronica noticed the illuminated light, glanced in her direction, and deliberately turned away to attend to a white passenger several rows ahead who hadn't even pressed their button. After waiting 10 minutes, Zara pressed the call button again. This time, Veronica walked directly to her row, reached up, and turned off the light without speaking a word to Zara. As she turned to leave, Zara spoke up. "Excuse me, may I please have some water?" Veronica stopped, her back still to Zara. "I'll be with you when I finish attending to other passengers," she said without turning around. She then proceeded to serve every other passenger in the surrounding rows, systematically ignoring Zara's request. Another 30 minutes passed. Zara's head had begun to ache from dehydration. She pressed the call button a third time. This time, Veronica marched directly to her seat, leaned across the passenger by the aisle, and hissed, "The call button is for emergencies only. If you press it again, I'll have to report you for disrupting the flight." She then reached up and deactivated the button entirely, something Zara hadn't even known was possible. The small act of technological sabotage declared in no uncertain terms that Zara was being singled out for different treatment than the other passengers. The woman sitting next to Zara frowned. "That doesn't seem right," she murmured, but made no move to intervene. With her mouth parched and her patience wearing thin, Zara decided she needed to use the restroom and perhaps could get water there. She politely asked her seatmates to let her out and made her way down the narrow aisle. Just as she approached the economy-class lavatory, Veronica stepped directly into her path, blocking access with her beverage cart. "Return to your seat immediately," Veronica commanded, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "I need to use the restroom," Zara explained, trying to keep her voice steady. "We're experiencing turbulence," Veronica announced, despite the fact that the seatbelt sign was off and the flight was perfectly smooth. "Certain passengers need to remain seated for safety." "Certain passengers?" Zara questioned, unable to hide her frustration any longer. "Don't take that tone with me," Veronica snapped. "Return to your seat now, or I'll have you met by security." When we land. From 2 rows back, a passenger had been discreetly filming the interaction on his phone. Zara didn't notice him, but Veronica did, and it only seemed to fuel her anger. She leaned in closer to Zara. "You're being disruptive," she hissed. "This is exactly the kind of behavior we're trained to watch for." Humiliated once again, Zara had no choice but to return to her seat, still thirsty and now desperately needing to use the bathroom. As she squeezed past her seatmates, she noticed Miguel watching from the rear of the plane. Their eyes met briefly, and he looked away, clearly uncomfortable with what he was witnessing but unwilling to challenge his senior colleague. For the next hour, Zara watched as Veronica distributed snacks and beverages to every passenger in the economy cabin, except her. Each time Veronica passed her row, she acted as if the middle seat were empty, as if Zara were invisible. The man who had been filming earlier caught Zara's eye and gave her a subtle nod, as if to say, "I've got this documented." It was a small comfort, but not enough to ease the growing sense of isolation and injustice that threatened to overwhelm her. 2 hours into the flight, the captain's voice crackled over the intercom, warning of upcoming turbulence. Seconds later, the plane began to jostle, causing the flight attendants to secure their carts and take their seats. Zara gripped the armrests, or would have, if both hadn't been claimed by her seatmates. The turbulence lasted only a few minutes, but in that brief period, disaster struck. The water bottle Zara had finally managed to get from Miguel before the turbulence began tipped over, despite her efforts to secure it. The contents spilled directly onto her project notes, which she had been reviewing in the limited space available. "No, no, no," she whispered, frantically trying to blot the spreading dampness with the single cocktail napkin she'd been provided. The ink began to run on several critical pages detailing her algorithm's methodology. As the seatbelt sign turned off, Zara desperately looked around for napkins or paper towels. Seeing Veronica approaching with the beverage cart again, she raised her hand. "Excuse me, I need some napkins. My notes got wet during the turbulence." Veronica looked at the wet papers, then at Zara, her expression devoid of sympathy. "You should have secured your items properly." "I tried," Zara explained, "but there's hardly any space here and—" "Don't blame your carelessness on the seating arrangement," Veronica cut her off. "You should be grateful you're on this flight at all." The comment was so inappropriate that several nearby passengers audibly gasped. The man who had been filming earlier reached for his phone again. "Please," Zara persisted, her voice trembling slightly. "These are important notes for a science competition. I just need some napkins to dry them." Something in Veronica's expression changed then. A hardening, a resolve that sent a chill down Zara's spine. The flight attendant leaned in close, her voice low but intense. "Listen carefully. Every flight, I deal with people like you who think the rules don't apply. People who think they deserve special treatment. People who make my job harder than it needs to be." Zara blinked in shock. "I'm just asking for napkins." "You're causing a disturbance," Veronica countered, her voice rising. "First, you try to sit in first class where you don't belong. Then you repeatedly use the call button against instructions. Now you're creating a mess and demanding special attention." The accusations were so blatantly unfair that Zara couldn't contain herself any longer. "That's not what happened at all. You've been treating me differently from the moment I stepped on this plane." Veronica's face flushed with anger. "How dare You accuse me of what? Zara challenged, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Of treating me differently because I'm black? Because that's exactly what you've been doing. The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Several passengers turned in their seats, watching the confrontation unfold. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Veronica did something none of them expected. She laughed, a short, dismissive sound that somehow cut deeper than her words had. Playing the race card now? Typical. This has nothing to do with your race. This is about your behavior. My behavior? Zara repeated incredulously. I've been nothing but polite while you've ignored me, refused me water, deactivated my call button, and accused me of sneaking into first class despite having a valid boarding pass for that seat. Veronica's face contorted with rage. She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper, but still loud enough for those nearby to hear. People like you are why I hate this route. Always making everything about race when you simply don't know how to behave in public. Gasps erupted from surrounding passengers. The man filming zoomed in on Veronica's name tag. Realizing she had crossed a line, Veronica straightened up, her professional mask slipping back into place, though her eyes still burned with hostility. That's it. I'm reporting you to the captain. Expect to be met by security when we land. Accusations of discrimination are a serious matter, and making false claims has consequences. She turned on her heel and walked toward the front of the plane. Moments later, her voice came over the PA system. Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for any disruption. We are currently dealing with a problem passenger. The situation is under control, but we may require assistance from airport authorities upon landing. Thank you for your patience. Zara sat frozen in her seat, the weight of what had just happened crushing down on her. If she was detained at the airport, she would miss her competition entirely. Everything she had worked for, everything her family had sacrificed for, would be lost. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she fought them back. She needed to think clearly. The woman beside her awkwardly patted her arm in a gesture of sympathy, but said nothing. The man across the aisle shook his head in disgust, but kept his eyes forward. In that moment of isolation, a memory surfaced in Zara's mind. Her mentor, Dr. Elaine Washington, had given her a card before she left. If you ever need anything at all, you call me, the neurosurgeon had insisted. I mean it, Zara. Day or night. Dr. Washington wasn't just any mentor. She was a respected figure in the medical community, with connections throughout the country. She had taken an interest in Zara's project after meeting her at a community science fair, recognizing the potential of both the algorithm and its creator. Zara's hand trembled as she reached for her phone in her pocket. She had been reluctant to use it during the flight, but this was an emergency. As she unlocked the screen, she saw Veronica watching her from the front of the plane, her eyes narrowed in suspicion. In that moment, Zara made her decision. Whatever consequences came, she would not allow herself to be bullied and discriminated against without fighting back. With a deep breath, she scrolled through her contacts and pressed call on Dr. Washington's number. The phone barely rang once before Dr. Elaine Washington answered. Zara, is everything okay? You should be in the air right now. Dr. Washington, Zara whispered, her voice catching. I need help. As concisely as possible, Zara explained the situation, the first-class seat confusion, Veronica's escalating behavior, the threats of security detention upon landing. Dr. Washington listened without interruption, her silence growing heavier with each detail. Put me on speaker, Dr. Washington instructed when Zara finished. Her voice was calm, but Zara recognized the controlled fury beneath the surface. By now, Veronica had noticed the phone call and was storming down the aisle toward Zara, her face contorted with anger. Electronic devices must be in airplane mode during flight, she announced loudly, reaching for Zara's phone. I'll have to confiscate that. Zara's hand shook as she pressed the speaker button just before Veronica arrived at her row. This is Dr. Elaine Washington, Chief of Neurosurgery at Mercy Hospital and board member of the National Medical Ethics Committee. came the clear, authoritative voice from the phone. To whom am I speaking? Veronica froze, her hand still extended toward the phone. I'm Veronica Pearson, head flight attendant on this aircraft. Ms. Pearson, I understand you've been discriminating against my mentee, Zara Mitchell, throughout this flight. Is that correct? Absolutely not, Veronica replied, her professional mask slipping back into place. This passenger has been disruptive and… I wasn't asking for your interpretation, Dr. Washington cut her off. I want to speak with the captain immediately. Veronica's laugh was short and dismissive. That's not possible during flight. Now I'll need to take this phone. Ms. Pearson, Dr. Washington's voice turned glacial. Perhaps I should clarify my position. In addition to my medical credentials, I serve on the board of the Aviation Safety Council, and I happen to be a close personal friend of Jonathan Reeves, who sits on your airline's board of directors. The color drained from Veronica's face. So I'll repeat my request. Get the captain on this call now, or I will personally ensure this becomes the most scrutinized flight in your airline's history. This is clearly a fake call, Veronica declared, though her voice had lost its certainty. Anyone could claim to be someone important. Ma'am, the man who had been filming stood up from his seat. I have video of everything that's happened since this young lady was forced out of first class. Would you like me to share that with the proper authorities, or would you prefer to follow the doctor's instructions? Other passengers began to stir, the collective silence finally breaking. I saw it too, called a woman from across the aisle. The way you've treated her is shameful. She hasn't had water for hours, added another. As voices of support began to rise around her, Zara felt a wave of relief wash over her. She wasn't alone after all. Veronica's expression cycled through shock, anger, and finally, a calculating assessment of her deteriorating position. Without another word, she turned and marched toward the cockpit. Zara, are you all right? Dr. Washington asked through the phone. Yes, Zara replied, though tears of relief now streamed freely down her face. Thank you for believing me. Always, Dr. Washington said firmly. No one deserves to be treated this way. I want you to know that whatever happens next, you've done nothing wrong. Minutes later, the captain's voice came over the PA system. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Reynolds speaking. Due to an onboard situation that requires attention, we will be returning to our departure gate. We apologize for the inconvenience and will provide further information once we've landed. A collective murmur swept through the cabin. Veronica remained in the forward galley, refusing to make eye contact with any passengers, especially Zara. Miguel, the younger flight attendant, moved through the cabin offering reassurances, though he carefully avoided any direct mention of the situation. When he reached Zara's row, he bent down slightly. I'm sorry, he whispered. I should have said something sooner. Before Zara could respond, the plane banked in a wide turn, beginning its return to the airport they had left just hours before. Dr. Washington stayed on the line throughout the descent. I've already contacted the airline's executive offices, she told Zara. There will be representatives meeting the plane. Tell them everything exactly as it happened. Don't embellish, don't minimize. The truth is powerful enough. As the plane touched down and taxied back to the gate, Zara felt a strange mixture of vindication and anxiety. She had stood up for herself, but at what cost? Would she still make it to her competition? Do you think I'll still get to Washington in time? She asked Dr. Washington. Leave that to me, the doctor replied with characteristic confidence. Just focus on telling your story. Have you ever had that pivotal moment when someone with authority finally believes your story? Comment number 1, if you've ever had an ally step in when you needed them most. Hit that like button if you believe in the power of speaking truth to power, even when your voice shakes. And subscribe now if you want to see more stories of courage in the face of injustice. But what would happen when the plane landed? Would the airline take Zara's side, or would they protect their employee? And would Zara ever make it to her competition now that her flight had been grounded? The moment the aircraft door opened, A team of airline representatives in crisp uniforms boarded, led by a severe-looking woman with a tablet in hand. Passengers were instructed to remain seated while the situation was assessed. "My name is Diana, Winters' Customer Experience Director," the woman announced. "We understand there's been an incident on this flight. We'd like to speak with the parties involved." Veronica immediately approached, speaking in hushed tones while gesturing emphatically toward Zara. Her body language conveyed absolute certainty in her position. Zara remained in her seat, still on the phone with Dr. Washington, who had insisted on staying connected throughout the process. "Diana Winters is good," Dr. Washington commented. "She's fair, but she'll need evidence." The man who had been filming stood up. "Ma'am," he called to Diana, "I have video documentation of what happened." He introduced himself as Professor James Chen, a law professor at Georgetown University. "I witnessed systematic discrimination against this young woman." Diana's expression remained neutral as she nodded. "We'll review all evidence, Professor. For now, I'd like to speak with..." She consulted her tablet. "Zara Mitchell." As Zara made her way to the front of the plane, other passengers called out words of support. "Tell them everything, honey. We saw what happened. Don't let them intimidate you." The impromptu chorus of solidarity gave Zara strength as she followed Diana into the jetway, where a small table had been set up for interviews. Veronica was already there, seated across from a male airline representative who was taking notes. "Ms. Mitchell," Diana began, "I understand you've made serious allegations against our flight attendant." "I didn't make allegations," Zara replied, carefully. "I simply identified the treatment I was receiving for what it was." Diana raised an eyebrow slightly, then gestured for Zara to continue. For the next 15 minutes, Zara recounted the events of the flight in detail: the first class, confusion, the public humiliation, the denial of basic services, and the escalating hostility. She spoke clearly and factually, avoiding emotional language even as she described deeply hurtful actions. When she finished, Diana turned to Veronica. "Ms. Pearson, your response?" Veronica's account painted a completely different picture. According to her, Zara had attempted to upgrade herself without authorization, become belligerent when confronted, repeatedly violated safety protocols, and disrupted the flight with false accusations of discrimination. The passenger became increasingly aggressive, Veronica concluded. "I feared for the safety of other passengers and crew." "That's absolutely false," Zara said, maintaining her composure despite the outrageous claims. "And there are dozens of witnesses who can confirm my account." Diana nodded thoughtfully. "We'll be speaking with other passengers. Professor Chen has already provided video footage which we'll review. In the meantime..." She was interrupted by the arrival of another airline executive, a man in his 50s with a harried expression. He whispered something in Diana's ear, and her eyes widened slightly before her professional mask returned. "Ms. Mitchell," Diana said, "I understand. You're traveling to Washington, D.C. for a science competition?" "Yes," Zara confirmed. "It starts tomorrow morning." Diana nodded. "Given the circumstances and delays, we'd like to offer you compensation to resolve this situation. We can place you on the next flight to Washington, upgrade you to first class, legitimately this time, provide meal vouchers, and add 10,000 miles to your account." Zara blinked in surprise. The offer was generous on the surface, but something felt wrong about it. "And what about what happened today?" she asked. "What about Ms. Pearson's behavior?" "We take all customer concerns seriously," Diana replied, smoothly. "We'll conduct a thorough internal review." The corporate speak wasn't lost on Zara. An internal review could mean anything from a serious investigation to a complete burial of the incident. "What she's offering," Dr. Washington's voice came through the phone Zara had kept on the table, "is hush money. They want this to go away quietly." Diana's expression tightened at the interruption. "I assure you, our offer is simply to compensate Ms. Mitchell for the inconvenience." "The inconvenience of racial discrimination?" Dr. Washington challenged. "This isn't about a delayed flight or lost luggage, Ms. Winters. This is about a fundamental violation of a passenger's civil rights." Veronica stood abruptly, I've been with this airline for 15 years. I've never discriminated against anyone. This is ridiculous. Then you won't mind if we review the evidence thoroughly, Dr. Washington replied, including the video footage, witness statements, and the pattern of service denials that multiple passengers observed. Diana cleared her throat. Dr. Washington, I understand your concern for your mentee, but the airline has procedures for handling passenger complaints. And I'm sure the Department of Transportation and the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department have procedures as well, Dr. Washington countered, as does the Court of Public Opinion. The tension in the small jetway space was palpable. Diana exchanged a glance with her male colleague before turning back to Zara. Ms. Mitchell, perhaps we can increase our offer. In addition to the flight and miles, we could provide financial compensation in the amount of— No, Zara interrupted, finding her voice. This isn't about compensation for me. This is about making sure what happened today doesn't happen to someone else tomorrow. Be practical, Diana urged. Your competition starts in the morning. If you pursue this further now, you'll miss it entirely. The implied threat wasn't subtle. Accept our terms, or sacrifice the opportunity you've worked so hard for. Before Zara could respond, there was a commotion at the aircraft door. A group of passengers emerged, led by Professor Chen and an older black woman who introduced herself as Reverend Marion Taylor. We've taken a vote, Reverend Taylor announced. 23 passengers are willing to provide written statements confirming Ms. Mitchell's account. She handed Diana a sheet of paper with names and contact information. We believe this young woman deserves justice, not a payoff. Diana accepted the list with a tight smile. Thank you for this information. We'll certainly take it into consideration as we— There's more, Professor Chen interrupted, holding up his phone. The video I captured has already been viewed over 10,000 times on social media. Diana's professional composure finally cracked. You posted it? Without authorization? Public space, public interest, Professor Chen replied calmly. The hashtag, Justice for Zara, is trending in 3 cities already. As if on cue, several airline representatives hurried down the jetway, whispering urgently to Diana. Outside the windows, Zara could see news vans pulling up to the terminal. How did they find out so quickly? Diana asked, more to herself than anyone else. I might have made a few calls while we were taxiing, Dr. Washington admitted through the phone. Discrimination thrives in darkness, Ms. Winters. It withers in the light. Diana took a deep breath, visibly recalculating her approach. Ms. Mitchell, I assure you the airline takes these allegations extremely seriously. We would like to conduct a proper investigation while still ensuring you reach your competition. She glanced at her tablet. There's a direct flight leaving in 90 minutes. We can have you on it in first class with our most experienced crew. And Ms. Pearson? Zara asked. Diana hesitated. She will be placed on administrative leave pending the investigation. Veronica gasped. You can't be serious? Based on the word of a teenager and some edited video? Based on 23 witness statements and unedited footage, Diana corrected her. And the fact that Thaikar Justice for Zara is now the top trending topic in the airline industry. As Veronica sputtered in protest, more airline officials arrived, one of them taking her aside for a private conversation. The expression on her face shifted from indignation to shock as the reality of her situation became clear. Meanwhile, Diana turned back to Zara. We'll need a formal statement from you, but we can handle that after you've reached Washington. Your competition is important and we want to make this right. Zara looked to the phone for guidance. Dr. Washington. Get it in writing, the doctor advised. All of it. The investigation, Veronica's leave, your new flight arrangements, and a commitment to review their training protocols. Diana nodded, already typing on her tablet. I'll have it ready before your departure. As the negotiations continued, other black passengers from the flight approached Zara, sharing their own experiences with Veronica on previous journeys. She's done this before, an older gentleman confided. Never quite this blatant. But same pattern. I fly this route monthly, and I've learned to avoid her sections. I complained last year, a businesswoman added. They sent me a form letter and some miles. Nothing changed. The stories confirmed what Zara had suspected. This wasn't an isolated incident, but part of a pattern that had been allowed to continue unchecked. By standing her ground, she hadn't just defended herself. She had potentially created an opening for systemic change. As airline representatives scurried about, arranging her new flight and processing paperwork, Zara felt a strange calm settle over her. Whatever happened next, she had refused to be silenced. That, in itself, was a victory. By the time Zara boarded her new flight to Washington, D.C., the video of her confrontation with Veronica had been viewed over 100,000 times. Justice for Zara was trending nationally, and the airline's social media accounts were flooded with comments demanding accountability. Seated comfortably in first class with a cabin crew that treated her with almost excessive courtesy, Zara scrolled through the reactions on her phone. The story had clearly struck a nerve, resonating with countless people who had experienced similar treatment but lacked the support or platform to challenge it. The airline's initial response came midway through her flight, a carefully worded statement acknowledging an incident involving a passenger and crew member, and promising a thorough investigation. The tepid corporate language did little to address the outrage building online. "We take all allegations seriously and are committed to providing an inclusive environment for all passengers," the statement concluded, without ever mentioning discrimination or apologizing to Zara specifically. The backlash was immediate and fierce. Social media users dissected the statement, pointing out its evasive language and lack of concrete commitments. Memes comparing the airline's response to notorious non-apologies from other corporations spread rapidly. By the time Zara landed in Washington, news crews were waiting at the gate. Dr. Washington had arranged for a community advocate to meet her, shielding her from the most aggressive reporters while allowing her to make a brief statement. "I'm just a student trying to get to a science competition," Zara told the cameras, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. "What happened today happens to people who look like me all the time, without cameras or witnesses or powerful friends to help. That's what needs to change." The simplicity and power of her words resonated across platforms. Clips of her statement played on evening news broadcasts nationwide. Meanwhile, the airline was facing mounting pressure. Their stock price had dipped 3% by market close. Customer service lines were jammed with callers demanding to know what actions would be taken. Several high-profile customers publicly announced they would boycott the carrier until the situation was appropriately addressed. In Detroit, Zara's classmates organized an impromptu protest outside the airline's ticket counter at the airport, carrying signs reading "Fly fair or don't fly" and "Stand with Zara." Local news covered the demonstration, interviewing students who spoke passionately about their friend's character and accomplishments. "Zara's the smartest person I know," her lab partner told reporters. "She's going to change medicine someday if people get out of her way and let her shine." The airline's CEO, Richard Blackwood, initially attempted to contain the situation with a second statement, this one delivered as a video message. With practiced concern, he described the incident as a misunderstanding and suggested that both parties could have handled things differently. The attempt at both sides' equivocation backfired spectacularly. Within hours, side-by-side comparisons of Zara's original treatment and the CEO's response were circulating online, along with the hashtag, "Not a misunderstanding." While public attention focused on the airline, Dr. Washington was working behind the scenes to ensure Zara could still compete. She arranged for a courier to deliver fresh copies of Zara's damaged presentation materials and connected her with a local printing service to replace what couldn't be salvaged. "Focus on your competition," Dr. Washington instructed during their nightly call. "Let the rest of us handle the airline for now. You've done enough." But the controversy refused to remain contained. When Zara checked her social media before bed, she discovered thousands of new followers and messages of support pouring in from around the world. Along with the encouragement, however, came darker content. Anonymous accounts had begun posting her personal information online. Others sent graphic threats describing what would happen if she didn't know her place. Still others questioned her story, dissecting the video for any evidence that she had provoked the situation or exaggerated her claims. The hotel provided additional security after several concerning individuals were spotted in the lobby, asking for Zara's room number. Local police increased patrols around the convention center, where the competition would be held. Through it all, Zara tried to maintain her focus on the reason she'd come to Washington in the first place. Her algorithm represented 2 years of work and could potentially help thousands of people in communities like hers access earlier medical interventions. That was what mattered, not becoming the center of a viral moment, however justified the attention might be. The morning of the ICHI competition, Zara woke to breaking news. The airline's board of directors had called an emergency meeting. Unnamed sources reported that several major shareholders were demanding leadership changes in response to the handling of the incident. As she prepared to leave for the convention center, Zara received a text from an unknown number. "They're making an example of you. Back off now or regret it." She reported the message to hotel security and tried to push it from her mind. The science competition awaited, and with it, a new set of challenges she couldn't yet imagine. The Washington Convention Center buzzed with activity as hundreds of young scientists from across the country prepared to present their projects. Under normal circumstances, Zara would have been overwhelmed with excitement and nervousness. Today, however, she felt the additional weight of unwanted attention. Whispers followed her through the exhibition hall. Some competitors openly stared, while others pretended not to notice her at all. The viral video had made her instantly recognizable, transforming her from an anonymous participant to a polarizing figure before she'd even presented her work. "Just ignore them," advised Ms. Rodriguez, who had flown in that morning to support her student. The computer science teacher had used her own savings for the last-minute flight after seeing the news. "They'll be focused on your algorithm soon." "Enough." Zara nodded, trying to channel her nervous energy into preparation. Her presentation station was tucked in the corner of the biomedical technologies section, away from the more prominent central locations given to students from well-known schools. It was a subtle reminder of the hierarchies that existed even in spaces dedicated to merit and innovation. As she arranged her materials, Zara noticed something disturbing. Despite Dr. Washington's efforts, some of her critical documentation was still missing. The damage from the water spill had been worse than she initially realized, and several key diagrams illustrating her algorithm's decision tree were illegible. "I can redraw these," Zara told herself, pulling out her tablet. There's still time. But as she worked frantically to reconstruct her visuals, another problem emerged. The convention center's Wi-Fi was overloaded, preventing her from accessing her cloud backup. Without it, she would have to recreate complex statistical models from memory. The first round of judging would begin in 30 minutes. Zara felt panic rising in her chest but forced herself to breathe deeply. She had overcome greater obstacles than this. She would find a way. "Need any help?" A voice interrupted her thoughts. Zara looked up to see a young man from a prestigious private school in New York, his own elaborate display already perfectly arranged at a prime location near the entrance. "I'm good, thanks," Zara replied cautiously. "You're her, right? The girl from the plane?" His expression was unreadable. That was intense. But maybe focus on science today instead of activism? The comment stung, but Zara refused to show it. "My algorithm is my focus. Always has been." The young man, whose name tag identified him as Alexander Wells, glanced at her partially assembled display. "Interesting approach to diagnostic prediction. Very basic." His eyes lingered on her notes. "Though I see some similarities to my own work on pattern recognition in medical data." A chill ran through Zara as she watched him return to his station. His project title board read, "Revolutionary Pattern Recognition Algorithm for Early Disease Detection in Limited Resource Settings." The description was eerily similar to her own project, though his display featured sophisticated 3D visualizations and professional quality materials that her school could never afford. "Ms. Rodriguez," Zara whispered when her teacher returned, with coffee. "I think that guy might have stolen my idea." Together, they walked casually past Alexander's display. The core methodology was undeniably similar to Zara's, though presented with far more technical jargon and elaborate visuals. Most concerning were the datasets. identical to those Zara had compiled from public health resources over many months. "That's your work," Ms. Rodriguez confirmed, her expression darkening. "But how did he get access to it?" The answer came in a flash of realization. Zara's backup materials had been stored in her cloud drive, the same account she had accessed, on her phone during the flight. If someone had been monitoring the aircraft's Wi-Fi network. Before she could pursue this theory, the first round of judges approached her station. 3 stern-faced experts with clipboards, ready to evaluate her work. Zara straightened her shoulders and began her presentation, determined to overcome yet another obstacle. The judges listened impassively as she explained her algorithm's purpose and methodology. Their questions were pointed, bordering on hostile. "This approach seems remarkably similar to Project 47, noted one judge, referencing Alexander's station number. "Are you familiar with that work?" "I've just seen it today," Zara replied carefully. "But my algorithm has been in development for 2 years, documented through my school's science program." Another judge raised an eyebrow. "That's a serious implication, Ms. Mitchell." "I'm simply stating facts," Zara responded. "My work is original, and I have the development history to prove it." The third judge, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. "You've had quite a lot of publicity lately. Some might suggest you're leveraging that attention rather than focusing on scientific merit." The accusation was so transparent that Zara almost laughed. "My work stands on its own, regardless of recent events. I'd be happy to demonstrate the algorithm's effectiveness using any dataset you provide." The judges exchanged glances, clearly not expecting such confidence. They moved on without further comment, but Zara could tell from their body language that she faced an uphill battle. As the day progressed, Zara noticed a disturbing pattern. Judges spent twice as long at Alexander's station as at hers. Competition organizers stopped by his display frequently, offering assistance and encouragement. Meanwhile, technical difficulties continued to plague her presentation. Power outlets mysteriously disconnected, her demonstration laptop glitching at critical moments. During the lunch break, Zara overheard 2 organizers speaking in hushed tones nearby. "The board is concerned about the optics," one said. "Having her advance after all that media attention would seem like we're making a political statement." "But if her work merits advancement," the other began. "Does it, though? Wells has the same methodology with better execution and none of the baggage. The choice is obvious." Zara retreated before they could notice her, heart pounding. The competition wasn't just unfair. It was actively biased against her because of what had happened on the plane. When she returned to her station, she found Alexander speaking with 2 of the judges who had evaluated her project earlier. They were laughing comfortably, like old friends. "My father's foundation would be delighted to fund further research," Alexander was saying. "We've been looking for exactly this kind of breakthrough." As if sensing her presence, he turned and smiled at Zara. "Mitchell, I was just telling the judges how your situation inspired me to accelerate my work. Representation in science is so important." The casual theft of her intellectual work, combined with the patronizing tone, left Zara momentarily speechless. Before she could respond, a competition official approached. "Ms. Mitchell, could we speak privately?" In a small office away from the exhibition floor, 2 senior organizers expressed their concerns about her continued participation. "Given the extraordinary circumstances and the attention surrounding you," one explained delicately, "we wonder if withdrawing might be best for everyone involved." "You want me to quit because I stood up against discrimination?" Zara asked incredulously. "We want to protect you," the other official insisted. "The media presence is disruptive. We've received security concerns, and frankly, the pressure on our judges to appear unbiased might actually disadvantage you." The implication was clear: withdraw voluntarily, or be eliminated anyway. "No," Zara said simply. "I won't withdraw." The officials exchanged frustrated glances. "Please understand, this is for your own good. The controversy isn't my creation," Zara interrupted. "I came here to present my work, just like everyone else. Asking me to withdraw because someone discriminated against me is just continuing that discrimination in a different form. As she returned to the exhibition floor, a commotion near the entrance caught her attention. Several of her fellow competitors were gathered around a mobile phone, watching something with expressions of shock and outrage. "What's happening?" Zara asked a girl from Ohio whom she'd befriended earlier. "Someone leaked the judge's scoring rubric," the girl explained, showing Zara the screen. "Look at this category. Professional presentation and conduct. Includes public reputation concerns. They're literally judging you on that airplane incident." Word spread quickly through the hall. Many competitors were outraged by the blatant unfairness. A boy from California, whose quantum computing project had earned widespread praise, approached Zara. "This is wrong," he said simply. "Science should be judged on merit, not politics." Within an hour, an extraordinary act of solidarity emerged. Dozens of competitors added small airplane stickers to their display boards, a silent signal of support for Zara and rejection of the biased judging criteria. The competition officials were furious, but powerless to stop the peaceful protest, without creating an even bigger controversy. As the final judging round approached, Zara found herself surrounded by unexpected allies. "They can't ignore all of us," the California boy told her. "And they can't fail everyone who supported you." Without revealing exactly what they're doing, for the first time since arriving at the competition, Zara felt a surge of hope. Perhaps merit would prevail after all. Then the fire alarm blared, loud and insistent. Security personnel entered the hall, directing everyone to evacuate immediately. Zara had just reached the end of her final presentation to the judging panel when the interruption came, perfectly timed to prevent them from asking questions or evaluating her demonstration. As participants filed out of the building, Zara noticed Alexander Wells hanging back near the exit, smirking slightly as he typed something on his phone. Have you ever had that sinking feeling when you realize the system is rigged against you, no matter how hard you work? Comment number 1 if you've ever faced unfair treatment in a competitive setting. Hit that like button if you believe merit should always matter more than politics or connections. And subscribe now if you want to see how Zara fights back against this blatant injustice. But as she stood outside the convention center watching security sweep the building, Zara wondered, how do you win when the rules themselves are designed to exclude you? And what new tactics would her opponents use next? While Zara battled discrimination at the science competition, the airline was launching a sophisticated damage control operation. Their public relations team had assembled a crisis management strategy that went far beyond the standard corporate apology. The first phase began with a carefully orchestrated media narrative. The airline released an edited version of the aircraft security footage that omitted key interactions between Zara and Veronica. The selective clips showed only moments when Zara appeared frustrated or assertive, stripped of the context that had provoked those reactions. "We believe in transparency," the airline's communications director stated in a press release accompanying the footage. "We want the public to see exactly what happened and draw their own conclusions." Social media influencers with connections to the airline suddenly began questioning Zara's account. "Have we heard both sides?" they asked in seemingly innocent posts. "Is there more to this story than a viral video shows?" The second phase targeted Veronica Pearson, reframing her as the victim rather than the aggressor. She appeared on a sympathetic morning news program, dabbing at tears as she described how a misunderstanding over seating assignments had been weaponized against her. "I've dedicated my life to customer service," Veronica claimed, her voice breaking. "To be called a racist based on a few minutes of interaction with someone I'd never met before. It's devastating." The interviewer nodded compassionately, failing to ask about the specific behaviors captured on video or the corroborating statements from multiple witnesses. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, the airline had deployed more insidious tactics. Private investigators were discreetly gathering information on Zara and her family. They examined social media accounts, school records, and financial histories, searching for anything that could undermine her credibility. "Find me something we can use," the airline's chief legal counsel instructed the investigation team. "Everyone has skeletons. Dig deeper." When the straightforward approach yielded nothing damaging, the strategy shifted. Anonymous sources began contacting news outlets with vague but troubling claims. Zara had a history of confrontations with authority figures. She was using the incident to gain publicity for her scientific work. Her family had financial motivations for pursuing legal action. None of these claims had factual basis, but they didn't need to. The goal wasn't truth but doubt, creating enough uncertainty in the public mind to dilute the outrage and sympathy Zara had initially received. The airline's most aggressive move came when their law firm contacted Eastside Community High School with a thinly veiled threat. The firm noted that the airline's charitable foundation had provided STEM grants to several schools in the district and was re-evaluating its community partnerships in light of recent events. The implication was clear: pressure Zara to settle quietly or risk losing future funding that the underfunded school desperately needed. Principal Davis immediately called the Mitchell family. "I support Zara completely," he assured them, "but I thought you should know what we're dealing with. They're playing hardball." The community's response was swift and powerful. Local businesses, church groups, and civil rights organizations rallied around the Mitchells, launching a crowdfunding campaign that raised over $50,000 in 3 days, more than double what the airline had ever donated to the school. "If they think they can buy our silence, they've underestimated this community," Reverend Taylor announced at a prayer vigil held outside the school. "Money can't purchase justice, and threats can't extinguish truth." But the airline's tactics extended beyond institutional pressure. Somehow Zara's personal information, her home address, phone number, and even her parents' workplace details, was leaked online. The family began receiving threatening calls and messages, some merely harassing, others explicitly violent. "You should have stayed in your place," read one message. "First class isn't for everyone. Next time it won't just be water spilled on your project," warned another. The threats became serious enough that the Mitchell family temporarily relocated to a hotel, their home watched by volunteers from Reverend Taylor's church and several off-duty police officers who had learned of the situation. Through it all, the airline maintained its public position. They were conducting a thorough investigation while respecting the privacy of all involved. Their stock price, which had initially dropped, began to stabilize as the corporate countermeasures took effect. "See how quickly people forget?" the airline's CEO remarked during a closed-door meeting. "Another week and this will be yesterday's news." But he had underestimated the resilience of both Zara and the truth itself, which would prove far more difficult to suppress than he imagined. Marcus Reynolds was not the kind of attorney the airline's legal team had expected to face. At 62, with a storied career arguing civil rights cases before the Supreme Court, he brought gravitas and strategic brilliance that corporate lawyers typically encountered only in fictional legal dramas. When he agreed to represent Zara pro bono, the airline's approach shifted from dismissive to defensive. Their initial settlement offer, already substantial, tripled overnight. $150,000 and a lifetime of free first-class travel, the airline's lead counsel proposed during their first meeting, plus a confidential apology from Ms. Pearson. Reynolds didn't even bother writing down the numbers. "My client isn't interested in hush money," he replied. "She wants accountability and systemic change, nothing less." That's an absurdly high bar for what amounts to a customer service issue, the airline's attorney argued. "Is that what you call racial discrimination these days?" Reynolds asked mildly. "A customer service issue? I look forward to quoting you on that in court." The airline's next offer came with additional zeros, but the same fundamental flaw. It sought to resolve the matter privately, with no admission of wrongdoing and no commitment to institutional changes. Meanwhile, Reynolds' team was methodically building their case. The discovery process revealed a troubling pattern. Veronica Pearson had been the subject of 17 previous complaints alleging discriminatory treatment, all filed by passengers of color. Each had been classified as resolved after cursory investigations that invariably concluded there was insufficient evidence of bias. More damning still were internal emails between airline executives discussing how to contain the situation after the video went viral. One particularly incriminating exchange included the directive to find dirt on the girl and redirect the narrative before this becomes a class action nightmare. The airline's legal team fought desperately to have these communications excluded, claiming attorney-client privilege. But Reynolds successfully argued that they represented evidence of a cover-up rather than legitimate legal consultation. As the case built momentum, the airline shifted tactics again, this time targeting the judge himself. Judge William Harmon had initially seemed impartial, ruling even-handedly on preliminary motions. But Reynolds' team discovered he had received multiple awards from aviation industry groups and had vacationed at a resort owned by the airline's parent company. Your Honor, we respectfully request your recusal from this case due to potential conflicts of interest, Reynolds stated during a preliminary hearing. Judge Harmon's face flushed with anger. Mr. Reynolds, I find this motion highly inappropriate and potentially sanctionable. I appreciate your perspective, Your Honor, Reynolds replied calmly. However, the appearance of impartiality is as important as impartiality itself. We've prepared a detailed brief outlining our concerns, which includes documentation of your connections to the defendant's industry partners. The judge had no choice but to step aside, but the delay tactic had served its purpose. The case was reassigned, pushing the timeline back by months. During this period, something unexpected happened. Current and former airline employees began contacting Reynolds' office, offering testimonies about a corporate culture that not only tolerated but tacitly encouraged discriminatory practices. We were trained to profile certain passengers as high maintenance or potential problems, explained one former flight attendant. The language was carefully neutral, but the application was anything but. We all knew which passengers they meant. Another revealed a troubling incentive system. Flight attendants received better assignments and schedules when they maintained rapid boarding times and minimal in-flight disruptions, metrics that created implicit pressure to rush or silence passengers who required additional assistance or raised concerns. As these testimonies accumulated, the scope of the case expanded. What had begun as an individual incident of discrimination was revealing itself as a systematic pattern of bias embedded in corporate policies and practices. The turning point came when the aviation industry's whistleblower protection organization published an anonymous report from a senior airline employee. The document detailed how the company's computer systems flagged certain passenger names for enhanced scrutiny during check-in and boarding, a practice that disproportionately affected travelers with names common in Black, Middle Eastern, and Hispanic communities. The Federal Aviation Administration announced an investigation into these practices the same day. Hours later, the Department of Transportation launched a parallel inquiry into whether the airline had violated civil rights regulations applicable to common carriers. Suddenly, Zara's case was no longer an isolated lawsuit, but the catalyst for a comprehensive federal examination of discrimination across the aviation industry. The airline's board of directors, facing pressure from major shareholders and watching their stock price tumble again, called an emergency meeting. Their legal advisors presented a stark assessment. Fighting the case to conclusion would likely result in not just financial damages, but regulatory penalties and potentially years of government oversight. Their new settlement offer reflected this reality: substantial financial compensation for Zara, a public admission of wrongdoing, termination of employees involved in both the incident and its cover-up, and most significantly, a legally binding commitment to overhaul training, policies, and practices related to passenger treatment. Reynolds brought the offer to Zara and her family. "This is comprehensive," he acknowledged, "far beyond what we might receive even with a favorable verdict at trial. The question is, does it deliver the accountability and change you're seeking?" Zara considered the document carefully. Will other airlines be required to make similar changes? Not directly, Reynolds admitted, but this would establish a new industry standard. Others would likely follow to avoid similar litigation. Zara nodded thoughtfully. Then I want one addition. I want congressional testimony. The public needs to hear the full story, not just see the results. Reynolds smiled slightly. They're not going to like that, but I think we have enough leverage to make it happen. The House Transportation Committee hearing room buzzed with anticipation. News cameras lined the back wall, journalists filled the press section, and spectators had queued since dawn for limited public seating. The day's agenda was unprecedented. Testimony on discriminatory practices in commercial aviation, sparked by a single incident that had captured national attention. Zara Mitchell sat at the witness table, her posture straight despite her nervousness. At 16, she was by far the youngest person in the room, yet she carried herself with remarkable composure. Beside her sat Marcus Reynolds, ready to provide legal guidance as needed. Across the room, airline executives occupied their own table, looking considerably less comfortable. CEO Richard Blackwood, flanked by his general counsel and head of operations, repeatedly adjusted his tie as cameras clicked. Committee Chair Congresswoman Eleanor Hayes called the hearing to order with a sharp gavel rap. This committee convenes today to examine troubling allegations of systematic discrimination in air travel, an essential public service that should be equally accessible and welcoming to all Americans regardless of race, ethnicity, or background. The questioning began with Zara recounting her experience. She spoke clearly and factually, avoiding emotional language even when describing deeply hurtful actions. The committee members listened intently, several visibly disturbed by the details. "Ms. Mitchell," Congressman Jackson asked, "prior to this incident, had you experienced similar treatment on other flights or in other transportation contexts?" "Yes, sir," Zara replied, "though never quite as blatant. Usually it's more subtle, extra, scrutiny during security checks, being questioned about my ticket when others aren't. Flight attendants seeming less attentive or helpful. So common that it becomes background noise," the congressman observed. "Until someone crosses a line so egregious it can't be ignored." When it was the airline executives' turn to testify, their carefully prepared statements quickly unraveled, under sharp questioning. "Mr. Blackwood," Congresswoman Hayes began, "your company initially described this incident as a misunderstanding. After viewing the video evidence and hearing multiple witness accounts, do you stand by that characterization?" The CEO shifted uncomfortably. "We acknowledge that Ms. Pearson's behavior fell short of our service standards." "That's not what I asked," the Congresswoman pressed. "Was this a misunderstanding, or was it discrimination?" "I cannot speak to Ms. Pearson's intentions," Blackwood hedged. "Then let's talk about actions, not intentions," Hayes countered. "Your own internal investigation found that Ms. Pearson denied Ms. Mitchell water for over 2 hours, deactivated her call button, and publicly humiliated her. Treatment not extended to any other passenger on that flight. How do you explain that disparity?" As Blackwood struggled to respond, another committee member introduced evidence from the airline's discovery documents. 17 previous complaints against Veronica Pearson, all filed by passengers of color, all dismissed after cursory investigations. "Is this what you consider adequate oversight, Mr. Blackwood?" the congressman asked. "Or would you agree that your company has a pattern of ignoring discrimination when it's reported?" The questioning grew increasingly pointed as the hearing progressed. The airline's training materials were examined and found to contain troubling language about identifying problem passengers with criteria that could easily enable profiling. Their complaint resolution process showed that reports mentioning potential discrimination were systematically classified as subjective perceptions rather than actionable issues. During an afternoon recess, a pivotal moment occurred off stage. Veronica Pearson, who had been subpoenaed to testify the following day, approached Marcus Reynolds in the hallway. "I want to change my testimony," she said quietly. "I can't do this anymore." When the hearing resumed, Veronica was unexpectedly added to the witness list. Visibly nervous but determined, she provided the committee with an unvarnished account that contradicted the airline's narrative. "We were trained to prioritize certain passengers," she admitted, "not explicitly based on race, but using codes and euphemisms that everyone understood. High-value customers versus basic travelers. Premium passengers versus back of plane." She described performance metrics that rewarded flight attendants for minimizing service recovery incidents, a system that incentivized ignoring or suppressing complaints rather than addressing them. Most damning was her revelation about the airline's response to the viral video. "I was told to claim I felt threatened," Veronica confessed. "To say she was aggressive when she wasn't. They coached me on exactly what to say in interviews." The committee room fell silent as she concluded, "I was wrong that day, deeply wrong, but I wasn't acting alone. I was working in a system designed to sort people into those who matter and those who don't." As the day's session ended, news broke that the airline's stock had plummeted 7%. Overnight, an emergency board meeting was called, resulting in the CEO's resignation before proceedings could resume the next morning. The second day of testimony focused on the broader industry implications. Dr. Washington presented systematic data she had compiled showing disparities in how passengers of color were treated across multiple airlines, from boarding incidents to in-flight service to complaint resolution. "This isn't about one flight attendant or one airline," she emphasized. "It's about patterns so normalized that they've become invisible to those who benefit from them and inescapable for those who don't." By the hearing's conclusion, the committee had announced plans for comprehensive legislation addressing discrimination in air travel, including mandatory data collection on passenger treatment, standardized complaint procedures with independent review, and civil penalties for carriers found to have discriminatory patterns or practices. For Zara, watching from her seat at the witness table, the outcome represented something she had begun to doubt was possible. Systemic change sparked by an individual's refusal to accept injustice as inevitable. 1 year after the flight that changed her life, Zara Mitchell stood at a podium before a packed auditorium at the National Medical Innovation Conference. At 17, she was the youngest ever keynote speaker at the prestigious event, invited to discuss both her award-winning diagnostic algorithm and her advocacy work in the aftermath of the discrimination case. "Innovation doesn't just happen in labs or boardrooms," she told the audience. "Sometimes it happens in courtrooms and hearing rooms, where we reimagine not just technology, but the systems that determine who gets to create it and who benefits from it." The settlement with the airline had been unprecedented in its scope and impact. Beyond substantial financial compensation, most of which Zara had used to establish a foundation supporting minority students in STEM fields, the agreement had mandated complete restructuring of the company's training programs, complaint procedures, and performance metrics. Veronica Pearson and several senior executives had been terminated. The airline implemented comprehensive anti-bias training developed by experts in civil rights and psychology. An independent oversight committee now reviewed passenger treatment data quarterly, with results publicly reported. Most significantly, the case had triggered an industry-wide reckoning. The Department of Transportation issued new guidelines for airlines on preventing discrimination, with regular compliance audits and meaningful penalties for violations. Several major carriers proactively overhauled their own practices, eager to avoid becoming the next headline. For Zara personally, the aftermath had brought both opportunities and challenges. Her algorithm had received special recognition from the American Medical Association for its potential to democratize early disease detection. Multiple universities had offered scholarships, impressed by both her scientific innovation and her advocacy work. But there had been costs as well. Months after the incident, her family had endured harassment from those angered by the changes she had helped initiate. She had lost friends who found the attention and controversy overwhelming. The psychological toll of becoming a public figure at 16 had required therapy and support groups to navigate. Was it worth it? Journalists often asked her, a question that always struck her as missing the point. Worth implied choice, as if standing up against discrimination had been a calculated decision rather than a moral necessity. After her keynote address, Zara participated in a press conference announcing a new initiative. Her foundation would partner with major medical institutions to implement her diagnostic algorithm in community clinics, serving under-resourced neighborhoods. The technology that had begun as a response to her grandmother's late-stage cancer diagnosis would now help thousands access earlier interventions. As the event concluded, a reporter asked about recent industry developments. "Are you concerned that Phoenix Airlines, the new budget carrier launched by your former airline's parent company, seems to have hired many of the same executives who resigned during your case?" The question highlighted a troubling reality Zara had been monitoring. While the specific airline involved in her case had transformed its practices, its parent corporation had simply shifted some problematic leaders to a new subsidiary, rebranding without necessarily reforming. Corporate structures can be reshuffled, Zara acknowledged, but consciousness once raised can't be lowered again. Passengers know their rights now. Employees know they can speak up. Regulators know where to look. That awareness is harder to escape than any legal settlement. The following week, Zara boarded a flight to visit a university she was considering attending. As she settled into her seat, economy class by choice this time, a flight attendant approached. "Ms. Mitchell?" the woman said with a genuine smile. "I recognized your name on the manifest. I just wanted to say thank you. I've been in this industry 15 years, and the changes this past year have transformed how we work. For the first time, our training actually addresses the real challenges we face." She discreetly showed Zara her name tag, which now included a small ribbon indicating she served on her airline's Equity Advisory Committee, a direct outcome of the industry reforms. "We still have a long way to go," the flight attendant acknowledged, "but at least now we're on the right path." As the plane taxied for takeoff, Zara reflected on the journey that had brought her here. Her initial goal had simply been to attend a science competition, to have her work judged fairly on its merits. She had never intended to become an activist or a symbol. Yet sometimes justice required more than individual accommodation. Sometimes it demanded challenging the systems that normalized discrimination, even when that challenge came at personal cost. The airline case had taught her that progress was rarely linear or complete. Each victory revealed new battlefields. Each reform highlighted remaining injustices. As she looked out the window at the receding ground below, Zara felt neither triumphant nor defeated, but resolved. The work of creating truly equitable systems, whether in aviation, medicine, education, or beyond, would continue long after her story faded from headlines. And she would continue to be part of that work, one algorithm, one policy change, one courageous stand at a time. Zara's journey illuminates powerful truths about confronting discrimination in modern America. First, systemic racism persists not through overt policy, but through normalized behaviors, subtle codes, and institutional blind spots that allow bias to flourish unchallenged. Second, individual courage matters immensely. Zara's refusal to accept mistreatment created ripples that transformed an entire industry. Third, true change requires both personal bravery and collective action. While Zara's stand was the catalyst, it was the witnesses who spoke up, the mentor who leveraged her influence, and the community that rallied around her that created unstoppable momentum. The story also reveals how power responds to challenges. When confronted, systems don't immediately reform. They deploy sophisticated countermeasures, from character assassination to financial pressure to narrative manipulation. Victory is rarely complete. As seen with the parent company launching a new airline, reform in one area often means bias simply shifts elsewhere, requiring ongoing vigilance. Perhaps most importantly, Zara's experience demonstrates that fighting discrimination isn't a distraction from achievement, it's a necessary precondition. She couldn't realize her scientific potential while barriers of bias remained in place. Removing those barriers benefited not just Zara, but countless others whose talents might otherwise remain untapped. The ultimate lesson is that justice is neither automatic nor inevitable. It must be actively pursued, often at personal cost, through persistent effort across multiple fronts, legal, political, social, and personal, with no guarantee of perfect outcomes. But as Zara discovered, the pursuit itself transforms both individuals and societies in ways that make the journey essential, regardless of its destination. What's your Zara Mitchell moment? Have you ever witnessed discrimination and had to decide whether to speak up or stay silent? Share your experience in the comments below. If you've been moved by Zara's courage to stand against systemic racism, hit that like button to help more people discover her story. And if you believe that individual actions can create meaningful change, subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories about ordinary people confronting extraordinary injustice. Remember, discrimination thrives in silence and wilts under scrutiny. Your voice, your support, and your willingness to confront uncomfortable truths all matter in building a more equitable world. Thank you for joining us in amplifying these crucial conversations, and may we all find Zara's clarity and conviction when facing our own moments of truth.